Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for popping in today. My name's Adriana. I'm the Health Promotion Coordinator here at the Gwinnett, Newton, and Rockdale County Health Department. And obviously, you've been with us for a minute, so you know Mary Beth. And you want to get us started on what we're talking about today?
Sure. So you may know this. February is, I think it's American Heart Month or National Heart Health Month. And cardiovascular disease is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, cause of death for adults in terms of chronic disease. And so it's something that's always worthy of talking about, but we wanted to capitalize on it and really think about what we can put on our plates, because that's more fun than talking about just about anything else. So that's what we're doing today.
Definitely. So let's see here. All right. So we're going to start off with some of the nitty gritty, right? So first off, we're going to start off with what is blood pressure? So blood pressure is one of those things that, we hear, we know, oh, it's too high, it's too low, but, it really is something that we absolutely need, right? So the blood pressure is your heart pumping all those nutrients, all that oxygen throughout the body to get to the rest of our organs, right? To get to our brain, our stomach, everything. And sometimes that does fluctuate normally. So, it's different when you wake up, when you're standing, than when you're sitting, than when you're walking. It always changes and it fluctuates based on the time of day, what you're doing, stress, activity, any kind of food you're eating. But there is a problem where it is consistently too high, right? So that's when we're talking about high blood pressure or hypertension. So a normal blood pressure when you go and get it checked is going to be about 120 over 80 or less. And then hypertension is when we see 130 over 80 or more. And either number can be a little bit elevated. It doesn't have to be both of them to have that high blood pressure. It's more common for the top, but they both can move around. So we're also going to talk a little bit about cholesterol. So when we're hearing about our heart, we hear about cholesterol, we go, oh, my cholesterol is too high, the cholesterol is bad, it's all kinds of things. But cholesterol is necessary to our bodies too, right? So we have to remember everything in moderation. So it's a fat that your body uses to, for energy storage as well as repairing, anything in the body. So you need it for, if you need new cells for like you've got a cut or your immune system, it's really, really helpful. The key components when we're surrounding cholesterol are the LDL, which is the quote unquote bad cholesterol, and the HDL, the good cholesterol, right? So when we hear that, we want to make sure that our HDL is high and our LDL is a little bit lower, right? So it sounds pretty good, think HDL higher, LDL lower. So the LDL we want to keep low because it sticks to those artery walls, right? So that causes some constriction going on. So your oxygen, any kind of nutrients, they can't really get through, right? But that LDL is good because it kind of keeps it like a barrier, right? So if the LDL is there, it can't really bind. The LDL can't bind because of the HDL. So that HDL is really important because it's done by eating super healthy foods and exercising, including those healthy fats, right? And then one thing that we did want to touch on is that cholesterol in and of itself, if you see like cholesterol and like the little nutrition facts, things like that, it's not necessarily bad, right? It doesn't always correlate to it's going to up my cholesterol. So if you have a question about something like that, please, reach out to your healthcare professional. But usually there's no big correlation there. You can have a smidge. And here you can see, I think you can see my mouse, but it's just this little yellow goo. And so that's going to, kind of represent the arteries kind of narrowing. So there you go. So all of this matters because uncontrolled high blood pressure and uncontrolled high cholesterol can lead to strokes, heart attacks, heart failures, and any other sort of cardiovascular disease. Cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death in Americans. And the big thing about this is that you don't have symptoms for high blood pressure. Sometimes you can feel like a headache or you can feel dizzy, but that's when it's really, really high. You don't have symptoms for high cholesterol. So you don't really notice it until you have that cardiac event. So we want to make sure that there are plenty of, risk factors that we can't change. So our genetics, our family history, but we can change our healthy habits and we can work with our healthcare providers to make sure that we don't have an issue. So all of this is super duper preventable, super duper, we can reverse it if there's an issue. So we want to talk through that. Yeah. All right. Mary Beth?
All right. Thank you, Adriana. It is always good to get the nitty gritty in there and help you see kind of the numbers and how things work. And there's more out there if you need it, but we're really here to talk about those kind of day in and day out behavior or lifestyle things because they really add up over time. And so you can control what's on your plate a little bit way more than you can control like what your parents or grandparents might have had in terms of health conditions. So one great way to control blood pressure and kind of by extension, heart health is following what we call the DASH diet, which we'll talk a lot more about. But it's basically like my plate with a little bit of modification, I would say. And thank you. The DASH diet, when paired with working on getting less dietary sodium, is really effective. So thinking about reading those labels, we're going to talk a lot about salt today, but salt is not the only thing that matters. Another is physical activity. So we've talked about it in previous presentations. If you didn't get to see those, let us know, and we can absolutely send you the link to our physical activity for everyone presentation. It's something that's independent of your weight, but getting a little bit of activity every day, even 10-minute chunks of walking, can make a huge difference in your heart health overall. Weight loss is another one, and I know that is something that a lot of people think about. It's $1 billion industry. But what I love to tell people is that the research really shows that a pretty modest amount of weight loss, like 5 to 10 pounds in a lot of people, can drastically reduce risk of chronic disease like heart disease and diabetes or the management of those conditions as well. Another is no smoking. Smoking is very hard on your heart. People think of your lungs, but it does affect your heart as well because everything's so interconnected. So Adriana has lots of great resources on quitting and getting support. So if it's something that is part of your life or a loved one's life, there are ways to kind of stop that cycle if the desire is there. The next one is alcohol, limiting it. I know there's a lot of information out there about how the quercetin in red wine is really good for your heart. And the research is really there to say the benefit is not so great that if you don't drink, you should start drinking. Like no medical professional is going to tell you to start drinking because of that minuscule red wine kind of health benefit. And so the guidelines are no more than 1 drink per day for women and no more than 2 for men. And if you're getting less than that, that's probably ultimately better for your health as well. And then last but not least, medication is a great way to control blood pressure for a lot of people. It's kind of just part of the deal that you're going to have much better control with these things plus medication. So taking medication as prescribed is the best way to really get the full benefit of that. And if you don't like we always want to advocate for communicating with your doctor or pharmacist about the ways medicines make you feel, because there are side effects sometimes, but there are sometimes other things to try, different medications, different amounts. And a lot of people don't think about that communication loop that exists, that if you don't like it, please don't just stop taking it, or don't take it when you think of it. It needs to be taken regularly in the way it was designed to work. And so if you have any questions about that, we can probably help out a little bit too. So DASH, you might have heard of the DASH diet. A lot of times we tell people not to try to do diets that have names, but this is one of the exceptions, this and the Mediterranean diet. But DASH stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. And so I thought this was a really fun graphic, but we have a handout that we're going to send to you that really breaks down what it would look like practically for a week of eating, which I think is really helpful. So it's basically focusing on whole grains. So that's a slight shift from my plate. Making sure you're getting lots of fruits, lots of vegetables. So you see it says 4 to 5 servings of vegetables and 4 to 5 servings of fruit. So that's more than even the dietary guidelines account for, but that's what keeps you full. That's what is helping you get a lot of things like potassium and different vitamins and minerals that really work in your body to help everything work smoothly and keep those organs functioning and kind of help with the cholesterol and digestion and everything else. That also talks about the same amount of dairy that you're supposed to get with My Plate, but so few people do, is the 2 to 3 servings per day of fat-free or low-fat dairy. I'm thinking about some plant-based proteins on the right side. You can see 4 to 5 servings per week. So you don't have to do it every day, but it is a regular part of the nutrition that you get from nuts, seeds, or legumes, which means like beans, peas, lentils, hummus, things like that, chickpeas. And then really thinking about our protein choices and trying to have less than 6, I think it means ounces per day of lean meat, poultry, or fish. So we can talk about some options and we'll show you some of those. And a big one is that it's a good idea to get 2 servings, 2 meals per week to have a seafood-based meal for a lot of heart health. So that's something that a lot of people don't do. So that might be your goal for the next month, is thinking about how could I get a little bit more seafood in my diet. Another thing is trying to limit sweets to 5 servings per week, which, depending on how you feel about it, sounds like a lot or sounds like a little. So trying to have it not every day and not like a huge portion most days or something like that. And then thinking about fats and oils, we're going to talk about choosing healthier fats and oils, which can be really helpful. Like we talked about on the cholesterol slide, it was not about limiting how much cholesterol is on the nutrition label. It was more about saturated fat that we're concerned about with those ratios of HDL and LDL. Anything to add there, Adriana? Okay. Just making sure. Sometimes we miss things. So you can see that it's very similar to My Plate. And so if anyone wants to put anything in the chat that you see that's similar or different, if you've been one of our participants before with My Plate, a good way to try to achieve those outcomes for the DASH diet is making your plate half filled with fruits and vegetables every time you eat. Choosing those whole grains, which would be like our brown rice, our whole wheat tortillas, oatmeal, things like that, because whole grains and the fiber in those really is heart protective in its own way. So it's like, it's not all about the fat and the salt. It's also about things like the heart healthy whole grains like oats. So you've probably seen it on the Cheerio box that it says like is a heart healthy food, and it's because of those whole grains and the fiber and nutrients that come in that. And then seeing how big protein really is on the plate. So many Americans are like, I need this big old hunk of chicken or this big old piece of steak to be full. And that's just really not true. So if you have questions on how to reduce that protein and not be full, we can absolutely send you some resources as well. And then the dairy up in the corner is to remind you, if you eat 3 meals a day, you're supposed to get 3 servings of dairy per day, but you can feel free to get those as snacks or dessert or at a meal, whether it's fluid milk or yogurt or cheese or whatever. And so just kind of putting it in words, some people are better with pictures, some are better than words. You want to try to aim for ultimately 8 or more servings per day of fruits and veggies. And I think they're talking about like a half cup serving. But if you're only eating like 2 right now, we are not telling you to go eat 8 tomorrow. Trying to increase that amount of fiber so quickly is probably going to cause you some discomfort in your digestive system. So, and it's also just really hard to do. So we really encourage, like, maybe try to get a vegetable before dinner if you're not doing that, or add 1 more to your plate, or can I have a fruit for a snack? Where can I add these in? 1 or 2 servings a day. And then over the course of a couple months, you could really get into that realm. Thinking about getting those plant-based proteins 4 or 5 times per week, trying to get that dairy if you're not is half of it. And then we have a couple more tips on the next slide. More whole grain cereals and breads. So swapping what you can, that kind of white versus brown when it comes to the grains conversation. But a lot of grains people don't realize are whole in their own right, like popcorn is a whole grain and oatmeal is a whole grain. And so if you have questions about making those swaps or how to use those things, or when you're baking, if you are a home baker, doing at least 50% whole wheat flour and 50% all-purpose for a recipe that called for 100% all-purpose. We don't recommend going 100% whole wheat unless a recipe calls for that. It's really going to be gummy or dense and you're not going to like it. And that's a big thing, is like, if you don't like what you're eating, you're not going to keep eating it, at least long term. And there is an ingredient out there that I love called whole wheat pastry flour. It can be a little hard to find, but you can buy it at Sprouts if you ever are near one of those, or on the internet. And that is something that's so soft, even though it's 100% whole wheat. It has great texture and works 100% substitution in baked goods. So if you can get your hands on that, that's really great. But if you don't cook very often, you don't bake very often, think about just buying a whole wheat bag of flour to keep in the freezer so it doesn't oxidize and get weird, and trying to see if you can make your pancakes for your special Saturday breakfast out of half whole wheat, half white. And then limiting our animal-based proteins to 6 ounces or less per day. So that's about the palm of my hand would be about 3 ounces typically if it was as thick as like your cell phone. And then thinking about liquid oils instead of solid oils or fats, and soft margarines can be good. And so just trying to swap those fats when you can. And it's not where we don't want to be scared of fat. A lot of our nuts and seeds have fats, and avocados have fat, which is good. But just knowing that it has twice as many calories per gram as a carbohydrate or a protein food. So it's just something that can add up really quickly if we're not mindful of it. So that's kind of what we mean by small amounts.
All right. And one more thing I have when it comes to lean meats or lean fish, it's always, sometimes it can be kind of expensive, right? To do like the boneless, skinless chicken breasts, or, certain types of like the 99%, ground turkey or whatever. You can always make substitutions. You can always cut off the skin yourself. You can always drain some of that fat out. There are all kinds of different ways to make your meat more lean, definitely. So when we're going to talk about, margarines, about limiting our fats, the big thing that we can talk about is there are about 3 types of fats, right? So the one that we want, the good fat, right? The one that we want in still some limitation, but, is very, very good. They're going to be unsaturated fats, right? So they are all derived from vegetables, plants. So they're going to be your olive oil, your canola oil. They're also going to be, your nuts, your seeds, your avocados, anything like that are really, really great for those unsaturated fats. You're also going to have those omega-3 fatty acids that are kind of, those are where we're thinking about fish, right? So our bodies can't make those omega-3 fatty acids on their own. So we've got to get them from somewhere else. So whether that be from other oils, from things like flaxseed oil or fish oil. So, upping that, intake of fish or things like that is really great for that unsaturated fat. Saturated fats, on the other hand, are things that we do want to make sure that we're limiting, right? So that's going to be things from animal meat, dairy, and even some things that we feel like are, kind of healthy, like coconut oil, right? So if it's kind of, you sit it out on the counter on a normal day, instead of having it in the refrigerator, if it's still solid, it's most likely to be a saturated fat, right? It's kind of heavy, kind of congeals. And then the last one that we're going to talk about is trans fats. So trans fats, we think of as fats that are oftentimes in, the things that really taste good, right? The things that are in the French fries, the prepackaged cookies, all kinds of things to like make them extend those shelf lives, right? So they taste good. And then they're also, if you leave it on the counter for a week, 2 weeks, it might not get moldy, right? So anything that, extends those lives. We want to avoid as much as possible those trans fats and then limit those saturated fats, because the way that kind of contributes to our body is that those kind of contribute to those LDLs, right? The ones that we talked about before that kind of help, they kind of start, constricting everything. So we want to make sure that we reduce those because they sort of sit in the body. So if this is one chain of fat and this is another chain of fat, they pile up. So you can't see through them. So blood can't flow through them. There's nothing like that. Whereas unsaturated fats from those plants, those oils, the fruit, the avocados, the omega-3s from fish, they kind of hang out like this. So you can still see through them. So, there's still blood being able to move and oxygen and nutrients. And that way those saturated fats can't stick right up next to them, right? So we want to make sure that we're reducing our saturated fats, trying to avoid the trans fats whenever possible, and focusing on getting a good, healthy intake of those unsaturated fats. Another thing that we talk about when it comes to heart health is to eat less sodium. So the DASH diet is much more effective if you're also going to lower your sodium. And so our goal is less than 2,300 milligrams per day. And we'll take a look at the back of something, right? But we want to make sure that it's lower in sodium. The American Heart Association recommends no more than 1,500. But what we normally eat as Americans is too high. So we're going to just shoot for 2,300, and then from there, shoot to reduce. But as you're starting to reduce salt, right, so we're going to season with herbs and spices instead, your taste buds are going to get used to that less salt in about 2 to 3 weeks. So we're still going to have that food, the flavor in the food, but we're going to reduce that salt to help with our health, and eventually, which will lead to a lower blood pressure. So ways to reduce sodium while cooking are just to move that salt shaker away from where you are, right? So if you cook and there's a salt and pepper shaker right next to you, maybe just leave the pepper, or add some things like maybe Mrs. Dash or, all kinds of things that will be, flavorful without that salt. Also using low sodium or unsalted broth or stock if you are, making a soup or a sauce really, really helps. Seasoning with lemon is always great. It adds some of that acidity, and that tang that salt can kind of bring to something, as well as wine. Any kind of cooking wine or anything like that. Unsalted, canned, or frozen vegetables are perfect. They kind of say if you're looking at something that has that can, it'll have a little thing that says no salt added or low salt added. And if it does still have salt, if you couldn't find the pinto beans or something that I can't find canned that are no salt added. So you can just rinse those guys out. Season with herbs and spices. Use salt very sparingly. It doesn't mean you can't have any, but sometimes to get to a place where we need to be, we've got to change the way we taste stuff. And then this is my favorite. So if you make a soup or a stew, sometimes it's good the first day, but the second day, after all those herbs and spices have really blended together, they've melded, it tastes even better. So sometimes make something the day before, so that way the second day you eat it, it's delicious. So a few more ways to cut out sodium are to use fresh poultry, fish, or meat instead of canned or smoked or processed. Lunch meat is a really big, like that processed meat or smoked meats are really oftentimes, kind of cured with some of that salt to, be preserved. So trying to use fresh, or if you do use canned or, smoked, try to rinse that off if you can. Limiting cured foods such as like bacon or ham or foods packed in brines also really helps to reduce that. Cooking rice or pasta without salt. I know that sounds crazy, but you can do it and it still tastes really, really delicious. You can use, a nice unsalted broth and that brings some flavor. You can add some herbs to it, some like basil or oregano. So it's really something nice and strong, but still delicious. Also cutting back on any kind of prepackaged mixes, frozen dinners. Canned soups or broths really helps. So if you have the time to make your own, that's always very, very helpful. As well as, knowing that, those frozen dinners oftentimes have a bunch of salt in them for preservatives. We talked about rinsing canned foods such as canned tuna or canned beans to remove some of that salt. When you rinse them, you can get out about 60% of the salt that is in that can. So it's always a good thing to do. And if you don't end up rinsing them, just be mindful of, there's all this salt already in something. Using spices instead of salt to flavor foods. So you are going to get a handout from us at the end of this, and it's going to talk about like, these are awesome herbs to put with chicken, and these are awesome spices to put with pork and different things, so that way we can reduce that salt but still have super flavorful food, because there's nothing worse than bland food, to me at least. You eat for health, but you also eat a little for enjoyment. Adding fruit to a breakfast or have it as a snack is a awesome way. So you're not having those potato chips or something like that. Also treating meat as just one part of the meal instead of the main focus, right? So instead of treating meat like this is a steak and eggs kind of meal, right? Steak and potatoes, just big hunk of meat, little bit of something else, maybe some green salad for decoration on the side. So maybe having it incorporated, right? So having a big piece of steak cut up and shared with the family in a salad, right? So there's all kinds of green and vegetables and fruits and things like that. So it's not just the main focus of something. And then it's going to happen. Some days you're going to have more sodium, or your DASH diet's going to get a little off base, right? You're going to have, you're not going to have time to have any sort of fruit one day, or one day you might mess up and do, some of your grains are, more refined, and that happens. Don't worry. Just try to keep a minimum, like an average about, things on that DASH diet plan level. So you want to make sure that it's, there are some days that are up and then there are some days that are down, but it kind of all evens out. So when we're talking about processed foods in the restaurants, those are going to be the highest when it comes to sodium. So processed foods, restaurant foods. So when we think of fast foods, we think of that, right? We think of that umami, that salty, that heavy taste. Oftentimes it's there. So this is going to be the salty six. So popular things that add extra sodium. So things that are just as simple as like bread or rolls, often can have higher salt in them. So you're going to want to take a peek at those nutrition facts, see, while you're standing there, like which one has more salt than this one. Cold cuts and cured meats like bacon have lots and lots of salt in them. They taste pretty good, but, making sure that one thing that I do for my sandwiches for when I come to work are, instead of using cold cuts, I'll go to, there's a Kroger not too far from my office, and I'll go to the Kroger in the, like right by where they keep the big spinning rotisserie chickens. They'll usually have some pulled chicken, and I'll get a package of that. It'll last me for a few days, and I'll use that instead of cold cuts or something that'll last well, but I can put it on my sandwiches or on my salads or something for a few days. So with that, sandwiches are also really, high in salt, and that also includes things like burgers too when you go out. Pizza, of course, when you go out, especially, and frozen pizza too, very, very salty. Cans of soup, can have as much as like 940 milligrams of salt, and that can be, more than half of your day's worth of salt already. And then even chicken. So even, some chickens have salt like in them already. So you just want to make sure that, you're choosing your chicken when you're going to the store and you're picking raw chicken. You want something that is not like in salt water. So when you're doing this, all of these soups and pizzas, we want to try to aim to cook more at home. And yeah, these are convenience foods, right? Because we are tired, we are working. So we want to try to find things that, are still convenient, but are, a little bit healthier for us. So instead of doing a can of soup, maybe on the weekend, making a big pot of soup and freezing a bunch of it. So that'll be easy to take, or using cut rotisserie chicken instead of cured meats and cold cuts. Or even, instead of doing a frozen pizza, trying to do a pizza like on a little whole wheat tortilla. So you add your own sauce, you add, your cheese, and you add your topping. So that way it's not those salty ones that have been there. So just watch out for those frozen and those box meals. So when we're looking at the nutrition labels, we are going to look at the saturated fat, right? And then the sodium. So both of those things we're going to want to be kind of lower. So when we look at the percentages, that's kind of the easiest way to do it, right? So we want things that are under, about under 15%. So that way, because this isn't the only thing you're going to eat today, right? So you're going to have to add things together. So, we want to keep that low for saturated fat and for sodium as well. Roller? You'll have to tell me what you mean, Gail. All right. And so when we're going back to this, food label, you're going to want to look for things that say low sodium or no salt added. Those have technical definitions, right? Low sodium is like 33, oh, it's fine. 33% of, the original amount of sodium. So it's definitely been taken down a lot, or no salt has been added to something. Whereas reduced sodium they can, have 200 milligrams of salt, and they can go to 1,900 milligrams of salt. And so that's not always it. And then you also want to remember that on those daily values of sodium, going back, you do want to keep that under 10%. And then, 15 is like a high max. And then balance those high sodium foods with those low sodium foods. So if you have, it's a Friday night, right? So it's frozen pizza night. We know this. We're coming for it. We understand it. Make frozen pizza night also have, salad and have some fruit with it, right? So we have, something for everybody. Or if you are, doing a blue box mac and cheese for whatever reason, it's easy, it's quick, you're trying to feed the kids, not a problem. Try to pick one that has that lower sodium, and then also make sure that they're eating something like oranges or apples or, grapes, something else to, have that low sodium food with it. So we're going to talk a little bit about special kinds of foods, which are delicious and not super duper special. But I want you to tell me in the chat what about this makes it heart healthy, right? So we'll go through breakfast together, and then for lunch, I want you guys to tell me what about that lunch makes it something that is heart healthy. So when we have overnight oats with apples and walnuts, something about that makes it heart healthy is that it has heart healthy fats with the nuts. It's got fruit. It's got a whole grain, so that oatmeal is whole grain. And it also has some chia seeds, if that's what you want. So it has those seeds in there that also have that healthy fat too, while it has all of the rest of that fiber and those vitamins and minerals. And then next to that are some egg cups. And now eggs, you can do this with eggs, right, with yolk, or just egg whites if your doctor's, saying maybe, to reduce that cholesterol, we want to, cut down on those eggs. So you can do this with whole eggs or egg whites, but you can add broccoli, peppers, and low-fat cheese. So you have all kinds of veggies, whatever you choose. Maybe you like mushrooms or spinach. But those vegetables make it really, really heart healthy, as well as choosing a cheese that is lower in fat. So when we talk here about lunch, take a look at what we have here, and I'll give you a couple of minutes and tell me what about either of these is super duper heart healthy. So we have a tabbouleh salad with grilled chicken and an orange for lunch. And we also have rainbow veggie wraps with hummus. Okay, so hummus in the wraps, definitely. So that's a protein that's made from chickpeas. So that is, something that's protein, but it's not a meat. So that's really, really good. Thank you, Gail. Stephanie says the fruit and the grains and the protein in the salad, definitely. So having a protein that is, grilled instead of fried is really helpful, as well as having those whole grains. So that can be, chickpeas or brown rice. So those whole grains are always really good. And having those fruits and vegetables in the salad. So those peppers, those cucumbers, all of that good stuff really helps it be heart healthy. Thanks. All right. Oh, and then with all of these, they're going to be things that are, we're going to be able to provide you with these recipes afterwards as well. So we've got here for dinner, we've got whole wheat chicken quesadillas with peppers and a fruit salad. And then we also have shrimp and broccoli stir fry with brown rice. So one more time, give me a shout out. Tell me what it is that is heart healthy about these items. Seafood and brown rice, definitely. So seafood, we talked about those omega-3 fatty acids. So making sure that those, you get some, I'm sorry, I almost said shellfish, but you get some seafood throughout the week. Salmon is your favorite, Gail? Awesome. Yeah, salmon is my favorite, to do salmon or tuna. But that can be, shrimp, that can be salmon, that can be tuna, that can be, cod, whitefish, whatever that looks like. Trying to get a little bit more than we already have in our diets to get those omega-3 fatty acids. And if we, for some reason, I know seafood freaks some people out, or it's an allergy for some people. So if you can't do that, talk to your doctor about different ways to, do omega-3s. So they have different vegan supplements, or, nuts and seeds and all kinds of different things. I see using whole wheat instead of flour tortillas. So that's important. Yeah. And especially if you do something with a quesadilla or something like that, where the flavors are so good, you won't even notice that it's whole wheat. We've got whole wheat is good, and fruit, definitely. We love a fruit salad. And I think fruit at dinner is, it gets a weird rap, right? So, you think about fruit, you think breakfast, you think a snack, but a lot of people don't think about having it for dinner. And it really, at least for me, as someone who likes something sweet after dinner, it really kind of satisfies that craving for me. This is also something when we're talking about whole wheat, some things can be whole wheat or brown rice, whole wheat tortillas, whole wheat bread, brown rice, whole wheat pasta, but it doesn't have to be 100%, right? So if you know that your kids will throw a fit if you do, whole wheat pasta, maybe choose half whole wheat pasta and then half regular pasta to just kind of get everybody acclimated to different things. It can be tough. All right, so for snacks, some snacks are apples, apple nachos, which are really yummy, with a nut butter or sunflower butter, if you're like me and you're allergic to nuts. But those sunflower seeds still have that same kind of, protein and those omega-3s. So, we get it either way. But these have just some cinnamon and raisins and a little peanut butter on them. So it's something good and flavorful. Non-fat yogurt with berries, and those berries can be fresh or frozen. So just kind of mixing them together. Sometimes you can add a little granola to that, all kinds of different things. And then snack mix that you make yourself, which is usually easier. Sometimes it's easy and it's tempting. And I know that there's like a snack mix in my vending machine, but sometimes you're not exactly sure what's in that or how much salt is added into that or sugar. So, we want to make sure we try something and we can just kind of do it easily at home. You can make a big tub, and as long as you don't have someone that is like my fiance who eats it all at once, it'll last you for a long period of time. So a snack mix with Cheerios, with popcorn, sunflower seeds, and craisins. So lots of good things. You've got the fruit, the whole grains, the protein, all of that in there. When we shoot for a snack, sometimes like just fruit or, whatever works is easy. But if we're trying for a really, really good snack, we want to try to get something with a couple of food groups. So fruit and protein, or, veggies and dairy. So something that kind of mixes stuff together. And then for dessert, because yes, dessert can be heart healthy. What's a life without dessert sometimes? So you can do, Mary Beth makes this stuff. It's really delicious. It's called strawberry fluff, and it's got like Cool Whip and a little bit of angel food cake on it and lots of fruit. And it's really, really yummy. So she's going to send that recipe when we do the afterward stuff. So, but yeah, incorporating fruit into a dessert is always a really great way to up that heart health. Also, once again, like she said earlier, splitting up that flour. So half whole wheat flour, half, all-purpose flour. So making it something a little different. This is also a whole wheat blueberry buckle. I had never heard of a buckle before, but it's like a cobbler, except instead of the the dough being on the top, the dough's on the bottom, and the fruit's on top. So you can make that pretty easily in the oven, and that is super duper yummy. And then just having that with the fruit, right? If we are going to use something like canned fruit or something, making sure that, we rinse off, something, or make sure it's like no salt, no sugar added, or, rinse it off if there's not. So when we're shooting to make a dash to good health, we want to reduce those high sodium foods, reduce our alcohol. The sun is so bright, excuse me. And reduce those high fat foods, especially those high fat foods that are high in that saturated fat, that fat that really sticks together. Then we want to increase our whole grains, increase our fruits and veggies, increase our non-fat and our low-fat dairy foods. Those are full of calcium and protein, so that is always amazing. If you do, happen to have any sort of, discomfort with dairy, there are all kinds of ways, to have that calcium and things like that without it. And we will gladly, talk with you if you have an issue with dairy. I personally have an issue with dairy. And then increasing your beans, your peas, your nuts, your seeds. So all of those sorts of plant-based proteins. And plant-based proteins doesn't have to be, sometimes it feels scary, but it doesn't have to be tofu. It doesn't have to be tempeh. It can just be a delicious, like a bean and kale thing, that has beans instead of, turkey or whatever. So making sure we're increasing our plant-based proteins. So for heart health, once again, to wrap it up, we have to remember to try to not smoke. So I'm going to put the Georgia Quit line in the chat. It's 1-877-270-STOP. They help with counseling, and if there's a need for patches or things like that. If you do need more specified help, more one-on-one help, we do offer that through the health department. So please reach out if you need something like that, or for a loved one. Aim for 30 minutes of activity a day, and that activity can be broken up into little chunks. So a 10-minute walk here with your dog, and 10 minutes playing, riding bikes with your kids, however you want to break that up into a day. And then remembering that controlling your weight is really important to make small amounts of weight loss, anything, they say anything as small as 3% of your body weight is really good. So small amounts of weight loss can make a big difference toward disease risk, as well as taking your medicine if you have a need for medicine. If your doctor talks to you about needing medicine to control your blood pressure or cholesterol, talking to them about it, seeing, what you can do. Excuse me. So those are our references. I'm going to put the chat, put the, oh goodness, the survey in the chat if you could, just answer some questions. It's very, very short, but it does put you as a runner-up for a prize. We draw prizes every time we come in here. And so we would love to, have you just, write up, and then in your 1-sentence summary about how you would, show your experience for the program. Just have your, include your email address, and that way we'll know that you will be interested in that drawing. And we'll choose 3 random names after each session. Gail actually just was our big time winner for our last year of classes. So she got a fun lunchbox. So I'm super excited about that. All right, so that's in the chat. Also, please reach out, sign up for our newsletter for Living Well Rockdale. Thanks, Gail. We'll get that to you soon. We'll figure it out. But please sign up for our Living Well Rockdale newsletter. Follow us. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Living Well Rockdale. We are, really trying to bring all kinds of new information out to the community. And so if you miss our smiling faces in between these sort of classes, please, let us know, and we can do different classes. We're also doing all kinds of different content and things like that. So thank you all so much. I'm going to put that also in the chat. And then does anybody have any questions, any experience with heart health, anything like that that you would like to share? All right. Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks, Lee. All right. Well, if nobody has any questions, and please, I'll give it a second. But if you have questions or you've had different issues with heart health or family, family pre-existing conditions or things like that, please feel free to share it with everybody in the chat. Please join us next month. The Piedmont Rockdale is doing their Lunch and Learn on Tuesday, March the 9th. And then you'll see us again on Thursday, March 25th. We're going to do better sleep bingo. So sleep is something that I am super duper passionate about. And I feel like we don't all get enough sleep. So we're going to talk about that more next week. Next week. Oh, geez. Next month. But sometimes it feels like next week. All right. And then please feel free to email us any kind of questions that you have. I'm Adriana Scurry, and Mary Beth had to step out to finish her conference, but you can email her as well at any time. Thank you all so much. I'm going to stop recording.